Welcome to Cut to the Chase, where we talk about compelling legal, regulatory, and public interest information and news. Your host is Greg Goldfarb, an attorney, entrepreneur, investor, and activist.
All right, folks, it's time for our favorite podcast, Cut to the Chase. I'm bringing on Lawrence Lambert to talk some business law, two big issues that people keep asking me about, and I'm not really a business lawyer. So I figured I would do the next best thing and bring actually a colleague and a fraternity brother, Lawrence Lambert. How are you doing today, Lawrence?
I'm great, Greg, with two G's. How are you?
Actually, it's three G's, but that's all right. I'll let you pass on that one. I'm wonderful. Thank you for asking. All right. So the two main topics we're going to talk about that seem to be on everybody's radar is the non-compete rule that just came out and the reporting beneficial ownership. I can't remember what the legal jargon is for that, but so let's cut to the chase, Lawrence. What do you want to talk about first? You want beneficial ownership or non-compete?
Well, we start with the beneficial ownership, and the rule is created pursuant to the Corporate Transparency Act. That's the actual statutory rule that was the basis for the Treasury Department issuing this beneficial ownership interest reporting rule. So that's sort of the legal basis for it. And I've been getting tons of questions about this. It's been in the business news quite a bit since it took effect, which was as of January 1 of this year. This new rule took effect. And to cut to the chase, the rule basically requires every small business in the United States of America to file what's called a beneficial ownership interest report with FinCEN, which is the arm of the Treasury Department that tracks illegal financing and terrorist financing and corporate infiltration by criminal conspiracies taking over businesses. And the purpose of it is to require each company in the United States effectively to identify who are the actual beneficial owners of the entity. You must record that information with the FinCEN. There's a website that we can talk about that where you go up and you publish that information, and then they use it to track potential terrorist financing or criminal financing of U.S. businesses. It's to crack down on the illegal use of business entities to engage in criminal conduct. So that's the genesis of the rule, and it's created quite an uproar in the business community, and that's the cut to the chase description. So,
all right.
What specifically would you like to know about it in more detail?
All right, us being from the 305, and we years ago there were the Panama Papers or whatever. When you say business, like pretty much every small business has to report. I want to go through the who, what, why, when, where, and how. All right. Okay. So when do they have to report by? Let's get that off the table.
So there are two different categories. So for existing businesses, so any business that was formed and operational before January 1 of this year, the deadline is the end of this year. So by 12/31/2024, existing businesses have to file their beneficial ownership report with FinCEN. Any new business that is formed starting January 1, 2024, you have to file. Initially, it was within 30 days of formation of the entity, but they've recently, or in the last few months, they changed it to 90 days to give people a little bit more chance to figure out what they have to do. But effectively, it's, as of now, 90 days from formation. So what does formation mean? Which can be a little bit, not really tricky, but it is defined. It's when you register your business with the state in which you are creating your business. So for a Florida business, when you file your incorporation papers with the state, Department of State, Division of Corporations, as of the date of the registration, that's when it starts to run your 90 days.
All right. So when we're talking small businesses, what about like a business that just kind of, you and I start some company, we think it's going to go somewhere and it really doesn't even take off and we're not making any money. Does that count?
It does. Any It's effectively any small business, as long as it's a business that is being created through the registration with the state, corporate office. So if you are just a sole practitioner, or a sole proprietor, then no. But if you are registering as an LLC, as an S corp, as a C corp, if you register as a limited liability partnership, or even a general partnership, if you register it with the state, that's when the triggering event occurs. So even if you're a single member LLC, when you register that entity with the state, you've got to file your beneficial ownership interest report. So it's very, very broad and all encompassing. There are actually, I think, 23 exceptions to the rule, but those exceptions are very narrowly tailored and won't apply to most small businesses. It's things like if you're a nonprofit, a 501c3, for instance, you're exempt. If you are a registered investment advisor, you're exempt. Banks, public companies, very specific types of larger businesses are exempt, and that's basically because they already have to file the same kind of information through other legal requirements. So it's really to close a loophole in our criminal financing tracking system where small businesses were being used to launder money because you didn't have to identify who owns it, right? You could create multiple shell companies and have them own other companies, and so you would never know who actually is owning or running the company, and it was easy to funnel criminal money and proceeds through those entities. And this is intended to close that loophole.
Yeah, I mean, it almost sounds like good legislation. I mean, did anybody really oppose it? I mean,
yes, I mean,
guys?
a lot of people oppose it. It is being challenged in court, so there is a possibility that a federal court somewhere will put a hold on it. And in fact, one court out of Alabama has put a temporary injunction on it. I haven't looked to see if that's a nationwide injunction or if it's limited just to the parties in that case, but it is currently pending before the 11th Circuit. So it is possible that in the next few months, the 11th Circuit will rule on that injunction. And if they find that it's a valid injunction, it may apply to the entire 11th Circuit, in which case Florida businesses might have a temporary stay of enforcement while that case continues. So we'll have to see. And ultimately, the Supreme Court will probably get a hold of it at some point in the next few years, and we'll get a final determination. But a lot of people do oppose it because it's not an ownership, it's not an onerous requirement. Right? All you have to do is identify the name, address, and position of the person who's the beneficial owners of the company, and submit it to the state, but to the federal government. But a lot of people don't like having to disclose their personal information. They feel like it's government overreach. The typical sort of reasons that people like their freedom, quote unquote, in America. They don't want to be burdened by government requirements to publish this information. And I will say, the one thing that is slightly onerous is you actually have to upload a picture of your ID. So it's not just stating your name and address. You have to submit a driver's license or passport, an image of it to prove that you are who you say you are. So to a certain extent, I understand people don't like to do that, but the reality is that information is already available through state driver license entities. It's already available to governments if they want to look at it. This particular reporting database is not a publicly available one for searching by anyone in their curiosity wanting to see who owns what. It's supposed to be protected and just for tracking of criminal financing issues. It's not a publicly available database. So theoretically it is secure.
All right. So I want to get to the how, which you just kind of touched on or whatever. But before we get to that, I want to go still through, which types of entities. All right. So you said nonprofits, don't have to do it.
Correct.
What about like condo associations? Because that's, I'm on the condo board, so
Yeah.
the other
Yeah.
people on my condo board have told me to figure this out.
Yeah. So condo associations, homeowners associations are an interesting dilemma under this law because, like I said, there is an exemption for nonprofits, right? And technically, condo associations, homeowners associations are nonprofits. When you form one, it's not a for-profit business, it is a nonprofit. And so it would seem like, hey, this is exempt. However, the definition of a nonprofit under the Corporate Transparency Act is explicitly limited to certain types of nonprofits, the principal one being the 501c3. Condo associations, homeowner associations get their nonprofit status through a completely different statutory scheme in federal, under the federal tax rules. I have to be honest, I can't remember the exact statute, but there is a different statute that grants nonprofit status to homeowner associations and condo associations. And since that statutory scheme is not included in the definition under the Corporate Transparency Act, technically the beneficial ownership reporting rules still apply to condo associations. I personally think that this is sort of an unintended loophole or gap in the law that Congress ought to quickly create a fix for, and specifically include condo associations as exempt, because it really doesn't make sense for them to be subject to this rule. It's particularly onerous because obviously condo association boards change. They can change annually.
Yeah.
And nobody actually owns a condo association except for the condo owners. So if you're a condo owner, and let's say you're in a small condo where there's only 4 units, and each unit owner owns 25%, quote unquote, of the association, all 4 unit owners would have to be listed as beneficial owners, because the rule is if you're a 25% equity owner in a business entity, you're considered a beneficial owner. So you have to register. So, you're required. It seems like an unnecessary burden on an entity that is not significantly likely to be used to engage in criminal financing.
Yeah.
Right.
All right.
So it's so it's a challenge, because the other part of the beneficial owner report is you have to identify not just who are the quote owners, meaning equitable, it's who are the decision makers. So if you are the president, vice president, treasurer of a condo association, you could be defined as a beneficial owner, also have to register your information. And since the turnover there is frequent, you have to redo it every time there's a change. So this isn't a one-time filing issue. It's every time there's a change in your beneficial owners, you have to file a new report identifying the new owners.
Okay, so let's go to the point where you didn't do it. You were supposed to do it. The IRS or the Department of Treasury figures it out. What's the penalty?
It's pretty steep. It's up to $500 per day of non-compliance.
Yeah.
So it can quickly increase to insurmountable numbers for a small business. So 10 days of non-compliance, that's $5,000.
$5,000, yeah.
Theoretically. Now, how easily or likely is it that they're going to initiate strict enforcement actions? Well, only time will tell. I would suspect, although please, no one listening should take this to the bank, that at the very beginning, when they start their investigations and they find that somebody's not in compliance, they'll probably give you a warning and give you an opportunity to cure it before they start putting fines on, because it's such a new requirement. But down the road, if this law is upheld and is deemed enforceable, I would not be surprised to start seeing the Treasury Department imposing steep fines. So it's definitely something to keep your eye on. And if you're not somebody that really cares too much about sharing your personal information, my advice is just file.
Just do it.
It's not worth the risk just on the principle of I don't want to share my information, right? It's stuff that the government can already get through other means if they need to. If you're just operating a small business, it's a very simple process to file. You just go to the Treasury FinCEN website, and there's a link there where anybody can go and file the report. It's free. There's no cost to do it. And if you're a single member LLC and you're just identifying yourself, it'll take you literally 10 minutes.
Yeah.
To do it. So
All
my
right,
advice is just do it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just to kind of reiterate what you just said. I mean, it sounds like a pretty simple process. You don't need to hire a lawyer. I know some people, some small businesses or whatever are getting flooded with, hey, give me 400 bucks and I guess if somebody files it on your behalf, do they have to get paid or something like that? I heard
Well,
some.
I mean, look, it's if a lawyer wants to do it as a free service for their clients, there's no rule against that. But
Yeah.
if somebody is filing on behalf of a third party, that person filing has to also file their information as the person filing the report.
Yeah.
So for lawyers, if you're going to file on behalf of your clients, you also have to identify yourself as the filing person who's handling that for the business. But also if a lawyer is going to be in this business, like I've registered myself already with with FinCEN as a filing entity, and so I just have to plug in my little code that they gave me, and it'll automatically populate for me my information. So, but I will say, look, I understand that even if small businesses, they don't want to have to deal with it, they don't want to worry if they're doing it right. Hiring a lawyer may make sense, but it's absolutely not required. And if you're willing to just spend a little time, looking at the website and reviewing the form before you fill it out to get a feel for it, really, it's very simple to do if you're a small business. If there's 2 owners or even 3 owners, it's very simple. It gets more complicated when you have different layers of ownership. So if you have like a parent entity and then you have a bunch of subsidiary entities, then you have to really drill down on making sure you know who the true beneficial owners are for the subsidiaries and the parent, so that you get it right for each different entity. And at that point, it may make sense to consult with an attorney.
Yeah.
But if you're running your own small business, there's really no reason to hire a lawyer unless you just want the comfort level of feeling like you didn't mess it up.
All right. So what about going back to the Panama paper thing, that when this law came out, I thought this was like perfect to, 'cause so many of the properties and, in Miami and South Florida are owned by, questionable people that are up to no good and laundering money. So, all right, let's say you decide to form an LLC just to buy a piece of property.
Yep, you're covered.
You're
100%.
covered. You got to do it.
Yeah, you got to file it. Yeah.
All right, that makes sense. Now, let's say it's next year, you've already filed, 3 people own your business, and 1 person drops out, dies, gets bought out. Do you have that? Does that trigger another reporting requirement? Do you wait till the end of the year?
Good question.
90 days?
If there's a change, you have to file the change within, I think as of now, it's 90 days. That may revert to 30 days after the first year. But yes, any change in ownership, you have to file an updated report identifying the new owners or the new beneficial owners. And I want to be clear, when we talk about a beneficial owner, it's not just the actual owners of the equity of the company. So it's not just shareholders or members if you're an LLC. It's anyone that has substantial control over the decision making of the business. So, a lot of companies, they'll have a president or a CEO who's an employee. They may not own shares of the entity, or they may own a small number of shares. There, you have to identify them as well. The cutoff for ownership is 25%. So if you own 25% or more of the equity of a company, you have to register as a beneficial owner, even if you don't participate at all in operations or management of the company. But if you are a general manager or a president or CEO of a company and you own no shares, you still have to register yourself as a beneficial owner.
Gotcha. All right. So let's go back to the condo example. You gave the 25% ownership. So that's a 4-person condo or 4-unit condo. But let's talk about like a 20-unit condo where maybe one person's, they have the penthouse and their percentage ownership is 25%. and everybody else is like 3%, and then there's 3
Mhm.
on the board,
Mhm.
and they have some kind of a representative that's actually making their decisions. So that person also, the penthouse, the person making the decisions that's getting a little salary, and then the 3 board.
I would say in that scenario, it's a little bit murky, but so in a case like that, if you have a larger condo and there's one unit owner that has 25% or more, it's likely that that unit owner is itself a business entity,
Yeah.
right? So in that case, you have to drill down into the ownership and management of that business entity. So if you have a CEO or a general manager or a president of the company that is managing the entity that owns that unit, those have to be identified as the beneficial owners of the entity that owns the 25% interest in the condo itself, as well as the owners. So if the owners are different, so you have an entity and let's say a husband and wife own it together, 50-50, both of them have to be identified. And if they also have a third party who's their manager or president that runs that business, that person as well. So now you've got potentially 3 or more people just for that one entity that have to be registered along with the condo board itself.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. All right. So last question on this topic, unless you think there's something else that we should talk about with
No.
this topic, but all right. So maybe somebody's listening to this program and they're like, hey, why don't I set up an operation to be a filer? Like you said, that you've already registered as a filer. Do they have to meet certain qualifications, or could anybody be a filer?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer, to be honest, of if it can be anybody. I think for the most part, it's lawyers and CPAs
Yeah.
that are doing this. I would suggest that anybody who is looking to hire somebody should make sure that if they're hiring a company, that company is using qualified attorneys, CPAs, to do the analysis, because it is quite legalistic for a more complicated business structure to figure out who the beneficial owners are. It's not so cut and dry once you have a more complex corporate structure. And you definitely want somebody who can understand, the rules and regulations governing that. So if it were me, I wouldn't want to hire somebody that I didn't know for sure had a qualified person doing the actual legwork.
Okay.
And if you're just hiring somebody and you're a single, like I said, a single member LLC, and you're hiring somebody, the only reason to do that is because you just don't want to deal with it, and it's worth it to you to have somebody else. But there's really no reason you can't do it yourself.
All right. And it's exclusively done through the internet. You can't mail the stuff in, or can you mail?
No, you can, but they really are encouraging people to do it through the portal on the internet, and I think that's the easiest, fastest, and most efficient way to do it.
Okay. And we're going to put all this information on the show notes and the link and all that. But what is the link again? Fincen.gov?
So the link is www.fincen.gov/BOI.
B as in
Again,
boy?
that's B as in boy, like beneficial owner information,
Yeah.
BOI. fincen.gov/BOI.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. All right.
Very simple.
Very simple. All right, folks. So that will do it for part 1 of this episode. In part 2, we're going to talk about non-competes.
That's all for this episode of Cut to the Chase. But before you go, will you open up your podcast app and give us a 5-star review? You can also leave a comment about what you liked most or other topics you'd like us to cover. And please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming shows. Thanks, everybody. Be safe out there.